Let's just dive a little bit deeper into these issues with the FBI's numbers, because I think it's very significant. And I imagine you agree, because CDC is one thing, that they at least have not changed their methodology. So we have consistent data from them. But it's, as you said, it's death certificates. So it's basically a coroner's determination as to whether or not someone was, killed by another person, or they committed suicide or something along those lines. And they don't get into the crime aspects of any of this. They don't make determinations on crimes. And so the FBI is the one who tracks that kind of stuff. And that's usually where you go to look at crime data in the United States and trends and this. That's where a lot of the numbers everybody's familiar with in the gun debate come from, about because they'll track weapon usage as well. And that's why we know that traditionally only about 500 rifles, which AR-15s are a subcategory of rifles. Everybody's, I'm sure, heard this talking point before, but only about 500 murders a year have been committed with rifles, and far more are committed with knives or with blunt instruments like bats, or even with, I think what the FBI calls them personal weapons, right? Which is fists and feet. So that's where those sorts of stats come from. And it's really troubling, right? That the FBI is really mishandled this transition to their new reporting system, because right as we're having this incredible change in murder, at least, or in homicide, because I guess we maybe should spend a little time talking about the difference between the homicide rate increasing and what's happened with violent crime generally, because they haven't seen the same kind of increases there. But how does this happen? How does the FBI mess this up at the worst possible moment, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of basically having made this decision 5 years ago or so, and what's happened since. I mean, there's you have the pandemic and everything that threw everybody off, and it also has to do with this. These always been voluntary systems, so we got to a really good place with the old system where we were getting coverage from about 95% of the population. I think the number of the percentage of agencies reporting was a bit lower. It was kind of in the 80 to 90% range, but those are mostly smaller agencies that weren't reporting. But this is a voluntary system, and we were at a pretty good place with it, with the agencies having both options to report their numbers in a simpler way or report it in a more complicated way. And they just ended up picking the absolute worst time to force everybody over. And because it's a voluntary system, you have a lot of agencies aren't doing it. They don't want to bother with it. It requires a lot of manpower to switch everybody to a new system requires data in a new format, requires more information to be collected about all these crimes. You need to retrain a bunch of people. You might need to upgrade your systems. And there's money available for that, but a lot of places just haven't gotten around to it. And sometimes the problem has even been at the state level. For example, California, there are a handful of agencies in California that have submitted their data just by themselves. But the way that it normally works is that the state agency pulls together all the information and sends it to the federal government, and that's not happening in California. So you're missing almost the entirety of California, including the LAPD. The NYPD also is not reported. So I mean, this is not just a matter of some smaller agencies the way it used to be. This is some entire states are almost entirely missing data. Some huge agencies aren't doing it. It's a total mess, and we're missing about a third of the country this year.
Wow. Wow. That's even worse than I thought. California is the most populous state in the country too. So, geez. Yeah. So I don't know, what does this mean? What does this imply for how we can look at this crime data now? Like, obviously there's going to be the political debate over rising homicide rates. It's one of the top issues in the midterms. It's the gun control groups are laying the problem at the feet of loose gun laws, and the other side is laying it at the feet of less aggressive prosecution of crime, right? But is there a fundamental problem with even trying to judge what effects any of these policies have, given how poor the reporting for this data is now?
I mean, I think when it comes to homicide specifically, the sort of the silver lining is that homicide is one of the better counted crimes. It's tabulated by both the CDC and the FBI, so we can get a sense of from the CDC data of what's happening. Even if the CDC isn't measuring exactly what we might want, the pattern is generally the same. When the FBI measure goes up, the CDC measure goes up. So yeah, I think with homicide specifically, you can turn and look at other data sources. To me, the big missing factor, though, is all these other crimes that they're trying to tabulate. Assaults, rapes, theft, all a whole bunch of violent property crimes. We just have no idea what happened in 2021 because we don't have a national source on it anymore. It's all, if you look at their report, it's the gist of it seems to be that changes seem to have been pretty small between 2020 and 2021, but the confidence intervals they have are just so wide because they're just missing so much data. They just don't know what happened.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty significant. Although, this conclusion that I mentioned earlier, that violent crime is actually not increasing the same level that murder has increased. Is that viable, or is that a problem given the reporting?
I mean, it seems. I mean, I would be hesitant to conclude that just based on the FBI report because it's frankly trash. It's very bad. But if you combine what we've seen out of individual police departments, I mean, if you also look at there's another recent data release from the Department of Justice sort of statistical machinery called the National Crime Victimization Survey. It's where they survey basically a cross section of the public, a representative sample, and ask them what their experiences were with crime. That can also give you a sense of these trends, and that seems fairly consistent across different measures. Is that first of all, in 2020, other violent crimes and property crimes did not rise the way that homicide did. In some cases, it even fell. I mean, especially in 2020, thanks to all the lockdowns and things. And they've been much more steady since. But we don't have nearly as good of data as we would have had if the 2021 data had been collected the way that the 2020 numbers were.